Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Interviewing Wednesdays, our special guest interview speaker series right now. It is February 8th, 2023. For those people on Zoom, if you have any questions throughout the presentation, please just enter them in the chat window. For those watching on Facebook, please just enter your questions into the comment field. We will be sure to get those questions answered for you. This event is being recorded and is currently live on Facebook. The recording will be on the Career DFW Facebook page and the Career USA YouTube channel for others to view in the future. By participating in this event, you give consent for your name and picture to appear. Please note that any comments you put in the Zoom chat window will not appear in the recording. Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jeff Morris. Back in 2008, I started a website called careerdfw.org, a website to help those who are unemployed in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. In 2012, I launched a second website, careerusa.org, to help those around the United States. I have written a book called What I've Learned About Your Job Search That You May Not Know. It is available on Amazon, or if you see me in person, I always have copies with me at a much cheaper price than you can get them on Amazon. Since 2007, I've been facilitating and leading the North Dallas Plano Career Focus Group. I'll tell you about our upcoming program we have coming up this Friday at the end of this session. And since 2017, I've been a member of the practice interview team. You'll hear more about that in just a moment. During the month of January and the first 3 weeks of February, we've had a bunch of different speakers talking about interviewing. We will get back to our 13-part workshop here at the end of the month. But you can see today's speaker and the speaker we have coming up next week. Let's see, is Walt on the call with us? I didn't see him earlier. Walt, are you there? No Walt today. Okay. Walt does something called the Interview Success Workshop. If you click on that QR code, or if you take a picture of it, it will start an email that you can send to him to sign up for his lessons. He does it on Tuesday. He only does 1 or 2 people at a time. This is a great precursor to the actual practice interview. Or actually doing a pit crew interview, because here they'll ask a question, let you give an answer, and then they'll stop and they'll talk about the answer, and they're going to meet more detail. Everything Walt does, it's selling about who you are, what you do, and how you help a company. So if you like to be interested, click on that QR code or take a picture of the QR code. It'll start, let's see here. It will start an email, look something like this, fill in the blanks, add a little bit of your own personal data. And if you'd like to reach out to Walt, you can find out more information about his workshop. It's totally free. You can read in the About section of Walt on Walt's LinkedIn profile. So if you're interested, reach out to Walt. Everybody who's taken this session says it's always a great time. You will be very, very glad you did. Also, for those on Zoom, if you'd like to email or communicate with each other, please feel free, just like Alexandra did, to post your contact information. You know, connect with everybody else who's on the call, because you never know who else you'd be able to maybe help or who else you can be able to connect with. So feel free to put that in the chat window. Those things in the chat window do not go into the recording and will not be on the recording that lands up on the internet later. All right, time to hear about the practice interview team. Good morning or good afternoon, Ron.
Hello, Jeff. Thank you very much. My name is Ron Layden, and I lead the practice interview team. And what we do is kind of like an adjunct to what Walt does. Walt is a one-on-one, and you ask a question and you then get direct feedback. What we provide is mock interviews. So it's literally like you're going to go into a company and have an interview, but it's in a panel format. So we will have 2 or 3 coaches or panelists that will be asking you questions, and then at the end, they will give you feedback. I had a gentleman call me this morning and he said, you know I should have done it, but I got an interview on Friday and I'm worried it's going to break down my confidence. What I explained to him is, we're going to give you more tools to use in your tool bag. You may learn a whole lot, but don't view it as you aren't good enough. Just view it as you're going to get more tools to use than you had before. Because our goal is literally to increase your confidence so that you can decrease that transition time and get a new employment quicker. Our motto is also practice early and practice often. So if you have multiple job opportunities, you can practice multiple times, okay? We're always looking for coaches and panelists. So if you know somebody that has been a hiring manager or you yourself has been a hiring manager, we'd love to have you on our panelists team to help provide this service to others. As always, the cost just like this is free. There's absolutely no cost to this. One of the other things that I want to make sure everybody understands is because of COVID, we've been doing this via Zoom, and we're going to continue to do it via Zoom. However, we're going to kind of change up the schedule. So starting March 1st, Wednesday, March 1st, we are going to meet in person. Okay. So whether or not we have an interview or we just have people together, we're going to do some things, and we're going to do it in person at the address that's listed there, 3101 Coit Road. That is a Methodist church. I don't know the exact name, Jeff.
It's Christ United Methodist Church.
Okay, Christ United Methodist in Plano. So the first Wednesday and the third Wednesday, we're going to do in person. We are not going to Zoom that out. So please take your time to come and do that in person. And on the second and the fourth Wednesdays, we are going to use this format for Zoom. So please take your time if you're in the Dallas Metroplex area. I know that prior to COVID, we probably averaged 45 to 60 people every Wednesday, and we had 4 to 5 interviews. So at one time, this was a very large organization. We'd love to see you in person again for that. All right. Thank you very much. And I think that's it. Back to you, Jeff.
Ron, thank you very, very much. All
Oh,
right.
hold on.
Yes.
One more thing.
Yeah.
Frisco Connect met yesterday for the first time since COVID. They're going to be doing theirs once a month. And I'm just guessing, but I know that Gary was there and Jeff was there and maybe some others. I estimated there were maybe 75 people there. It was a fantastic turnout. So people are starting to see the value of getting together again. So just kind of want to let you know about that.
Right. Yes, I really highly encourage people to come back out, start meeting people in person, because this is where you really make those connections. When you're online like this, you put your contact information in the chat window. You probably don't reach out to most of these people, but when you're meeting somebody in person, you can get into a little detailed conversation as far as who they are, what they do, how they can help, how you can help them. That's the most important thing. So please put on your pants, put on your big boy pants, and come out and meet people in person. Get out of the house. All right. Well, our speaker today is Tony Beshara. He's with Babich Associates. He's and he'll tell you a little bit about what he is here in a second. He's going to talk about the 10 biggest mistakes that people make in interviewing. This is a recorded presentation, but Tony will be with us at the end of the presentation to answer any questions you have. So please, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat window, and Tony will be with us to talk about. He'll join us. He's really, really busy. So he said he'd join us about 1:40, 1:45 today. And when the video's over, he will answer any questions you've got on the call. So questions, please just put them in the comment field and give me a second, and we will get this presentation started.
It's always a pleasure, Jeff. You're kind to do it, and we really appreciate what you're doing for the community.
Thank you very much.
All right. We're going to briefly discuss the top 10 mistakes that people make in an initial interview, and then we'll take any questions that you might have. I've prepared this for a number of different venues, so we'll go through some of these really quickly. There we go. I've been doing this since 1973. I've personally placed more than 11,000 candidates on a one-on-one basis. I've probably gotten more than 100,000 people interviews in that period of time. I've written 4 best-selling books on how to find a job. We have a 60-hour online program that we recently rewrote called thejobsearchsolution.com. I am the president of Babich Associates. We are the oldest placement and recruitment firm in the state of Texas, probably in the Southwest. We do everything that you can imagine except healthcare. We don't do any healthcare. We do banking, finance, accounting, sales, you name it, we do it. 99% of what we do is in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. some Austin, some Houston. So the mistakes that people make in the interviewing process, these are simple mistakes and they're simple to deal with. The first biggest mistake is that they think that they forget that an initial interview, especially all interviews, but especially the initial one, is a selling situation. So many candidates come to me with the idea of they think it's a consumer product. They are looking to, well, what do they want and how do they want it and who do they want it with, instead of recognizing that what they need to do is be selling themselves. And I tell people all the time, you sell yourself until you get to the altar. Until then, nothing matters. And until you get a job offer, nothing matters. So the idea that I'm buying and I have to be concerned about what they're what I'm going to get out of the deal doesn't mean a darn thing until you sell yourself. If you give them enough good reasons of why they ought to hire you, they're going to give you plenty of good reasons of why you ought to go to work there. And if you have it in your head that you're selling all of the time, you won't have a problem. The second one is people have a tendency to think that this is a two-way street. I heard it this morning from a candidate. Well, it's a two-way street. It's not a two-way street. There's the hiring authority, and in this market, there's an average of 14 candidates that are all trying to get the same job you are. It is not a two-way street. It's a 14-way street. Until you get to the altar, it's not a two-way street. Now, once you get to the altar and you want to try to exchange nuptials and try to get together, then it becomes, what can you do for me in the process? But until then, it's not a two-way street. If you give enough good reasons of why they ought to hire you, they're going to give you plenty of good reasons of why you ought to go to work there, and you can worry about that later. I had a candidate the other day, even after my coaching and my teaching, sometimes I wonder, what the heck? But he goes to an interview and he's halfway through the interview and he says, by the way, what does it pay? Yeah, he already knew what it paid because I told him, but he wanted to hear it. He said, well, I just wanted to hear it from the, no. What they can do for you questions, forget them. They're going to answer all of those once they have an idea that they want to hire you. Oops, I'll get this right in a minute. Okay, people have a tendency to focus on what they want in a job. Don't worry about what you want in a job. You got to focus on what the employer wants in the job. If you give an employer what he wants or she wants, then they're going to tell you what they can do for you. If you don't like what they can do for you, you don't have to take the job. We say it here all the time. You can't turn down an offer you don't have. Quit focusing on what you want. I get candidates all of the time and I ask them, what are you looking for in an opportunity? And my goodness, they'll have a litany of things that they want. But then when I ask them, well, what are you going to do for a prospective employer? Well, I'm a good employee and and they hadn't thought of that. And that's the most important thing they ought to be thinking about, not what they want in a job, but what does the employer want in the job? And then the fourth mistake is they don't know what they're really selling. I can't tell you the number of candidates I've interviewed over the years where I say, okay, now what are you selling to a prospective employer? Well, I'm a good employee. I'm just a good employee. Well, how do you know you're a good employee? Well, everybody I've ever worked for said they really like me. Well, yeah, but what specifically are you going to be able to do for them that the other people they're going to interview can't? Well, I have to think about that. Yeah, you really do have to think about that. And you've got to come down to absolute specifics. And I tell people in fact, I told this to an employer yesterday, the hiring authority is so wrapped up in his process of interviewing, they're going through 5 different kinds of interviews, that the hiring authority is forgetting to look at the candidate's track record. And what the candidate has got to sell is, I have been successful in my past. Here is where I have been successful. and therefore I'm going to be successful for you. And the more specific that a candidate is about where his successes have been. In fact, I recommend the more numbers that you can associate with your success. I increased sales, I collected debt, I somehow come up with as much as many statistical uh, um, issues as to why and how you've been successful, something that's measurable, something that I'm just a good employee, that doesn't tell people anything. If you say, I haven't missed a day of work in 14 years, and I've gone the extra mile because I volunteered for this committee and we got this done. The more you quantify things, the better off you're going to be. So you got to know what you're selling. And Jeff brought up something earlier that is really important, that you got to practice this stuff. It does not come naturally. And I teach it in our job search solution program, and I know Jeff does too, and your all's program does, but you've got to have a lip load of presentations of every job you've had, what you've done, how successful you were, and then communicate the idea that it's going to also be successful for them because you've been successful in the past. The fifth mistake is they can't bridge or articulate for the employer their specific abilities. Rarely are you ever going to run into a job that's exactly like the job you had. So you have to bridge for the hiring authority. I I claim that you've got to make the bridge for them, but you got to do their thinking for them. You've got to be able to say, now look, I was successful in this job. Here's what made me successful in that job. And from what I understand, what you are looking for or you need in the job you're interviewing for are the kind of skills that I have. Here is where I've done it before. And you've got to make that bridge for them. You've got to articulate not just what you've done, but how it applies to what they want done, and literally do their thinking for them. The sixth mistake, poor communication skills. Uh, I'm not sure. I don't know. Uh, Poor body language, not leaning forward in your chair, not animating enough in the right way. We have a whole course on this in our job search solution. I can't tell you the number of candidates I've seen lose out in deals because of their very poor body language. And it's not because they're sloppy, it's because they're scared. Look, next to death of a spouse, death of a parent, death of a child, coupled with divorce, the fourth most emotional thing we do is look for a job. And it often shows up in the interviewing process. They slouch, they don't speak clearly, they mumble, they don't look people in the eye. And I realize in many professions, it's not common to, I mean, you can get away without looking people in the eye. But in the interviewing process, you can't do that. And as we mentioned earlier, you got to practice this stuff. It does not come naturally, but those communication skills have to be strong. They don't necessarily have to be animated, and they don't necessarily have to be forceful. It's nice if they are, but just as long as you communicate and you make sure that you're communicating the right kind of thing. Answers to questions can be short, and answers to question could be right to the point, but they have to be the right answers. And it has to come across as interested and professional. Um, and over the past few years, lots of dressing and dressing differently. When I got in this business, everything was coat and tie. It is in our organization too, every day, coat and tie. But things have changed a little bit, but still slouching and not speaking clearly and mumbling and that kind of thing, people will get lost in the manner in which you speak more than the matter of what you do. Seventh mistake is improper dress and poor body language. I mentioned this a little bit ago. don't assume everybody's casual. Don't assume that just because I had a candidate show up in a coat and tie, a dress, a suit, and I'll be darned if the guy that was interviewing him wasn't wearing flip flops and cutoffs. That doesn't matter. You go dressed like you're looking to borrow $1 million. Is somebody going to lend you $1 million? Even if you overdress, it's better to overdress than it is to underdress. And I've, even to this day, I've had candidates go in with a golf shirt that, this happened the other day. Guy goes in with a golf shirt that was checkered or something. I don't know. The employer said, and then he had a sport coat over it, and it just looked terrible. It looked like the guy just had the sport coat hung up in his car, and didn't matter what he was wearing. He just put the sport coat on. The hiring authority was so distracted by that, he claimed that the candidate was disrespectful because he didn't dress the right way, and it got in the way of the quality of the candidate, because he was actually a pretty good candidate. And he said, well, his excuse was, well, when I even go into the office now, even though we used to not work from, we used to work from home. And if I go in dressed like I'm looking for an interview, like I'm looking for a job, they'll know. So but well, okay, fine. But if you're going to do that, explain to a hiring authority, look, I came from work. We dress casually there. You can dress casually in a nicer way where it doesn't look so weird as it looked in this particular case. And the hiring authority was so distracted by the whole thing, he never heard what the candidate had to say. And this was a 15-year experienced guy. So it wasn't some kid right out of school. The eighth mistake is not researching the company or the position that a person's interviewing for. You would think with all of the information that we have available to us, LinkedIn, the internet, I mean, my goodness, there's more information out there than you can possibly imagine. I am shocked that even after I teach candidates or sell the idea of do your research on the company and the person you're interviewing and all of that, it's just amazing that people just show up and say, well, I just really haven't had time to go and look the research up, but tell me, what do you do here? And I'm talking professional people that have been around for a while. Look, if you don't show enough interest in the opportunity to do the research on the job and the person that's in it, I've had candidates that have called people in the company to find out about the job, connected with other people that have worked there before. I had a candidate not too long ago. He had read some white papers that the company published. He knew more about the white papers of what the company had published than the guy that was doing the interviewing. And the guy that was doing the interviewing was pretty impressed by that. He said, I learned a lot about my company from your candidate. The guy did the research. It's not that hard to do. It doesn't take all that long, but you just don't look very interested in what you're applying for if you don't do that kind of thing. The ninth mistake is the inability to articulate what you'd like to see in a new job. Now, I'm not talking about money and benefits and parking and PTO and all of that. No, no, no. I'm talking about when somebody asks you, what are you looking for in a job? It's very important for a candidate to come up with intrinsic growth. I'm looking to grow intellectually, spiritually, intrinsically in an opportunity. I'd like to learn more. I'd like to be pressed a little bit. I find in some of the jobs that I've had before, I learned them and I didn't grow personally. You need to be able to communicate where you want to grow personally in a job. Because the truth is, if you're not growing on the inside, intellectually, from your heart, spiritually, in a situation, you'll, after a while, not very interested in the opportunity, and you won't work very hard. Kind of people that are most successful are the kind of people that figure out how to grow mentally and spiritually in their job. And so you need a couple of answers to that. What I'm looking for in a job is an opportunity to grow spiritually and mentally, and I want to be challenged. And from what I understand from talking around and doing my research, people can do that here in this kind of organization. That's why I want to be a part of it. And then the 10th mistake, ugh, they badmouth their present employer or their past employer. And common sense would tell you that you don't do that. Okay. But I guess common sense, even after 47 years of doing this, common sense isn't very common. Um, I just can't, and I warn candidates because when I interview them, they'll say, my company is this and my boss is that. And I realize there are a lot of screwball companies out there. There are a lot of screwball people out there. But you don't go in and talk about your past employer in any other way other than, I really respect the people that I work for. I've enjoyed the opportunity. I've certainly learned a lot. Here are the reasons that I'm looking to leave, and they better be good business reasons. But bad mouthing your employer, saying negative things about them, a hiring authority is going to think and assume that whatever you say about the people you've worked for before, you're going to eventually say about them. So no matter how horrific your situation might be, unless they've stolen money from you, and even then, I'd be careful about that, always have something positive to say. One of my associates here calls it a compliment sandwich. You say something positive about them, and then you give them a reason that is reasonable that you might be leaving for, and then another positive statement so that you couch whatever your reasons you are looking to leave in a positive way rather than a bad mouth way. And then there are also some things that you gotta, these are kind of minor, discussing personal problems in an interview. Well, I'm looking to leave because I'm going through a terrible divorce, or I'm suing my last employer. I had a candidate just last week. The interview was going so well. And he said to the hiring authority, well, I had to sue my last employer for the money that they owed me. Ah, end of interview. What do you think an employer is going to think about that? And this guy, what's so funny about it is he threatened to sue him. He never really did sue him. He's still at the same place that he was. He threatened him a year earlier. But do you think an employer wants to hear something like that? They don't. Being late for an interview, if you're in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, you got to know that wherever you're going to drive to, you got to get there a half hour earlier because we don't build up, we build out. And this is flat. And LBJ is crazy. The toll road is crazy. Every place you drive to is crazy. You got to be there early. And I even have candidates that drive to the place the night before just to be sure that they can get there. And don't necessarily rely on Google Maps. It can take you the wrong place and then you're late. And then, of course, once you're late, not apologizing for being late. I bet this happens even with my candidates, and I deal with professional salespeople, semi-professional salespeople, and that they'll show up late and they won't apologize. I mean, you wouldn't do that anywhere. And now, don't go overboard. If you go in and go, oh my God, I'm late, I'm so sorry I'm late, and all you do is talk about being late, you'll go overboard with it, but apologize for being late. Not closing the interview properly. We've talked about this on this program before, but there are 4 basic questions you have to ask in every interview. They are, first of all, have I made it very clear what my experience and my background is? Does anybody have any questions about what I've done and where I've done it? Lots of people will act like they know what you're talking about in an interviewing situation, but they don't understand. They don't want to appear ignorant, so they'll act like they understand you'll walk out of the door and then they'll go, I didn't really understand what the guy was talking about. So you ask, are there any clarifications I need to make about my experience or my background? Secondly, how does my experience and background stack up with what you're looking for? If I'm in your shoes, what strengths and what weaknesses might I have? Do you have any concerns about my ability to do the job? And then number 4, how do I stack up with the other candidates that you've interviewed? And get a really good idea and stop. And then the 4th one and most important one, what do I need to do to get the job? Now, I get candidates all the time that say, well, what if I don't want the job? You don't know whether you want the job or not until you get an offer. We had a candidate not too long ago that went into an interview for a controller's position. The job paid $175,000. He sold himself so well, they offered him $275,000. So you got to do it right and sell it right. Those 4 basic questions, they're killer questions. They are ones that you absolutely have to ask in order to get the job. And if you do a good job of that, if nothing else, you know exactly how you stand. So those are the 10 biggest mistakes that people make. There's a much broader presentation about this in the jobsearchsolution.com. So, any questions?
Just real quickly, just a reminder, this is pre-recorded, so these first few questions will be from the prior session, but then Tony will be joining us in about 10 or 15 minutes, and he'll answer any questions that you have that are currently live online. Yes, Daniel, why don't you unmute your mic and I'll let you ask your question.
Yeah, sure. So when I do company research, I can find a lot of general information about the company, but sometimes I want to ask specifically, like, so what does your team do? What's kind of the specific focus you're doing beyond the job description? Is that going to make me look like I haven't prepared well, or is there a good way to ask that?
No, that's not a bad way to ask it. You got to put it in context. It depends on how many other questions you might have, the rapport that you might be having with the interviewing authority or that kind of thing. That's a fair question, because no matter what anybody publishes on their website or no matter what anybody tells you, even in the lobby, there's always going to be a hidden lots going on in the company that you may not know about. That's a reasonable question. That's a reasonable question.
All right, thank you.
John's asking, can you please restate the 4 questions at the end of the interview that you want to ask again?
Sure. And the job search solution goes into these things in real detail. But the first one is, have I made it clear about what my experience is? And do you have any questions about my experience or background that I didn't make clear? Interestingly enough, although the other 3 are more pointed, that is probably one of the best questions you can ask, because I'll tell you, when people are asking you questions, they spend, I don't know, but it's probably 50% of their time thinking about the next question rather than what your answer is. I know employers that I work with that don't even take notes on the candidates they interview. I mean, that's crazy. You interview a candidate 2 weeks ago, unless you take copious notes, you don't remember who you talked to. You just don't. So lots of times you'll explain what you do and you think you've communicated, well, they know what I've done, but they don't. And you got to ask them, have I made it clear? So are there any questions about my experience and my background that I need to elaborate on? And I guarantee you there's going to be one of those people in that group or one person that's going to say, yeah, this job you had two jobs ago, I don't really understand what you did there. Can you explain it to me? So that's really an important question. Then the second question is, do you have any concerns about my ability to do the job? Now, what you're going to find out there is, how are you stacking up? Are you long in some areas and short in other areas? Do you have, do they have any concerns? I had a candidate this morning. The she asked that question, and it was a Zoom interview, and the group that she asked it with, one of them said, well, it doesn't appear in your background. I place primarily IT salespeople. It doesn't appear anywhere in your background where you've done financial application demos. And she said, oh, yes, I have. Well, part of their job is, as a salesperson in this company, is to be able to do WebEx demos. And this guy didn't get the idea that she had done that before. I guarantee you the other 3 people in that interview didn't get that idea either. If he didn't get it, they didn't get it. And so she was able to say, yes, in this job I had, and she pointed out the job she had, she said, I didn't even understand the software, and I learned it within a couple of 3 weeks of how to demo it. So asking that question about where am I strong and where am I weak is basically what you're doing. And then, how do I stack up with the other candidates that you've interviewed? Most employers don't know how to answer that question because they never get asked it. You would be surprised. You would be really surprised. I had a candidate ask that the other day, and they said, I don't know, you're the first one we've talked to. Okay, that's fair enough. But at least they'll give you an idea of how you stack up. And, you know, about the other people that were talked. I had a candidate a couple weeks ago ask that, and they said to the candidate, well, you know, your skills are really good. We do have an internal candidate that we really like. Well, now what that tells the candidate is that an internal candidate most of the time always has an advantage because they know the person. They probably aren't as good as the candidates that, frankly, this sounds self-serving, that I can come up with. I can probably come up with better candidates than what they have internally, but they know the person. So my candidate knew then that he was up against an internal candidate that he was going to have a hard time fighting that battle. And then the last one, and just real blunt, what do I need to do to get the job? And you'll be shocked at the number of people that you ask that of, that they just start laughing and they go, man, that's a good question. Nobody seems to ask that question. Now, the irony to all of this is I give people my job search solution, and out of 4, on average, out of 4 candidates, even though I teach it, only one of them asks all of those 4 questions. I don't get it. I just don't understand. You need a job. I'm telling you some of the things you need to do to get it, and only 1 out of 4 asks it. And when I ask the other 3, why didn't you ask? Well, it just didn't seem appropriate. Well, I wasn't quite sure. Well, we ran out of time, blah, 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 blah. What it means is you just didn't have the courage to find out, where do you stand? Look, when you're looking for a job, no is the second best answer you can get. If you're not going to hire my candidate, let me know now. The sooner you let me know. I may not agree with it. I may not like it, but at least I know. No is no. That means we move on to the next one. Yes, no, those are great. It's that maybe that kills you. And that's where people spend most of, even I do, after all these years, spend the emotional time and effort in that maybe. So, you know, and if you're not a candidate, that's fine. Find out quickly.
You know, it's that age-old question of they want you to talk about salary before they tell you what the range is. So how do you eloquently skirt around that?
Great question. Get asked that all the time. Here's what I would say as a candidate. In the past, in my last job or my present job, I'm presently making, or I've made, X amount of dollars. I'm not as concerned about the amount of money as I'm concerned about the opportunity, the growth, and the people. So tell them what you've been earning, but don't say, this is what I'm looking for, or this is what I need. Now, there are some, this is a paradox, and this is screwball, but in the state of California, and I'm not sure if it's true in New York, but I know in the state of California, you can't ask people what they've been making when they're in the interview. Now, after you go to hire them, you can find out what they've been making. Now, that's stupid, because if they've been making more than, totally a lot more than what you're going to pay, then they're not going to get hired anyhow. So, you know, I've had candidates, I say, what have you been making? And they say, I don't want to tell you. End of interview, as far as I'm concerned. That's not going to fly. They may have reasons for doing it. They may not want me to know. Usually it's because they feel like they've been grossly underpaid. That has nothing to do with it. It has to do with, if I ask that question, I'm, in my opinion, in my business, I'm going to have to tell my client, because they're going to ask me. And the candidates in the same thing. So don't tell them necessarily what you're looking for. Just say, this is what I've made in the past, but I'm flexible. If I've been out of work 6 months, I'm real flexible. If I've been out of work a year, I'm really, really, really flexible. If I'm on my present job and I'm leaving for maybe different reasons, I may not be as flexible, but they don't need to know that. This is what I've earned in the past. I'm open to the future. Whatever you do, and some guru I listen to stuff all the time on the internet about getting a job, and some yahoo was on there was saying that when you get asked that question, don't answer it, just ask the question, well, what does a job pay? Ugh. Any question that has to do with what are you going to do for me is a stupid question. Please don't do it.
So I've got a question for you. So of all the placements that you all make, that Babich makes, what percentage of jobs do you already know what the salary is, so you can prep the candidate when you're sending them in?
99% of them we know, and we're able to give them an idea what the range is. Sometimes people listen, sometimes they don't. And we try to make it reasonable for the candidate, and the employer knows that we're going to do that. Sometimes employers tell us wrong. You know, people, I read it in a book not too long ago, because I'm reading this kind of stuff all the time, that companies are going to publish the mid-range of the salary. That's not necessarily true. I mean, they're going to publish whatever they publish. Just handle it by being just careful. You're going to have, most of the time, somewhat of an idea before you go in. What you don't want to do is price yourself out of the opportunity, because there might be some really growth there. If money was the most important thing that people worked for, we'd all sell cocaine. You know, I mean, it's ridiculous. So you answer the question by, this is what I've made in the past, but I'm interested in growth, and then stop.
Okay. Leslie, do you want to ask your question?
Okay, so I wanted to know what kind of an answer could I expect from asking, what do I need to do to get the job? I had no idea. What are they going to say? Are they going to say, you need to do this, this, and this, and do 3 leapfrogs? I had no idea.
Yeah, pat your head, rub your belly, and sing the national anthem. No, the issue, don't worry about the answer. The answer isn't anywhere near as important as the fact that you asked the question. They may not even have an answer. It's going to be an answer of some like, well, we've got 22 other candidates. I'm being facetious. We've got a few other candidates that we're going to talk to. We feel like that you have provided us all the information that we need, but we appreciate your asking. And then you can even come back. Is there anything else I can do to enhance my position? The fact that you had the guts to ask it, and that you're willing to say, you're going to hire me or not, puts you in a light that is more courageous than most candidates. Most people are afraid somebody's going to say, nah, you're not going to get hired here anyhow. Well, okay, fine. You know, I mean, you're going to get 14 to 15 no's before you get a yes anyhow.
Just another little story in the pit crew. We had a candidate once who and he came back and told us that after the interview or during the interview at the very end, he said, you know, I saw that empty desk out there. Would that be my desk? And the guy sort of like chuckled from it. And actually he did get the job because he took it to the next step.
I had a candidate one time that interviewed with the CEO. It's now a $1 billion company. And the CEO said, it was not that big at the time, we'll let you know. And he one Monday morning, he showed up, went to one of the empty desks, opened up his briefcase, set his whole desk up. The CEO walks in and says, who's that guy? And the admin told him, she said, he's your new hire. He said, oh, okay, I guess so. Guy was there 15 years. He never really got offered the job. He took the job. Now, that's pretty gutsy, but you know, he made their decision for him. He wound up being a really good guy for the company. It takes guts. I don't know that I'd recommend that, but I mean, what's the worst? They throw you out? I mean, you know, so what?
Right.
I had a question about next steps, interview closing questions. Do you have any recommendation about how to ask those?
Sure. If depending on the answer you get from what do I need to do to get the job, I have some candidates that soften that by say, what's the next step? I don't like that because what they say is, well, the next step is we're going to have people back and we're going to do this and that and the other thing. Well, okay, then you might ask, how do I be certain that I'm going to be one of those? Okay. And look, you might as well be aggressive. Most candidates aren't. And they call me back and they say, well, they told me that the next steps are they're having people back next Tuesday. Well, are you going to be one of them? Well, I don't know. Well, you know where you stand. And, you know, what do I need to do to get the job? What are the other steps in the process? And am I going to be in? And you can say it nicely with a smile on your face. Am I going to be in that group that comes back to speak with you all?
All right, that is Tony's presentation. Tony's with us on the call here. So if you have any questions, Tony, thank you very much. Great presentation. I love the one fact that you talk about no is the second best answer you can get, because if you get the job offer, that's wonderful. But if you get a no, you know to move on. A lot of time, I think a lot of job seekers are sitting here hanging on forever and ever and ever. Well, I think I'm going to hear back. I think I'm going to get something, but they don't know that.
Well, the biggest challenge in that is, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, the biggest challenge is that most employers will have a tendency to try to be nice to everybody. And they don't want to really say, you suck, we don't want you, get out of here. They say, well, we're going to kind of let you know. And then the poor candidate, because they're hanging on every opportunity they can, they'll go 2, 3, 4 weeks still thinking that they're going to get called back, and they're not. And so by just asking that question and pushing the envelope a little bit, you kind of know where you stand.
Right. So thank you. All right. Anybody, if you've got questions, you're welcome to unmute your mic and ask Tony about the recruiting business. Questions. Just unmute your mic. You can hold down the space bar is all you need to do. Well, I'll tell you what, while somebody's thinking of something, my question, here, go ahead. Steve, you have a question?
Yeah, I was wondering about delay tactics. I have a potential offer coming today, and then I'm working for a smaller company. And then tomorrow I have, I think, a final interview with a bigger company. And I'm wondering what would be an appropriate, if they make me an offer today, what would be an appropriate thing to say as far as, when I can start and how to work this, so that I can pick the best offer.
Yeah.
Bigger company, I'm thinking might take a little bit longer to, they said
Well-
they'll work with me, but who knows?
Yeah. Have you met with that bigger company before?
Yeah, it's always via Zoom, but I've had like 3 interviews already, and I have the final one tomorrow morning. And then today I'm speaking with this other company that I had the last interview, and now HR said, they're ready to talk to me.
All right. I would tell the one that you're going to talk to today that you'll let them know something on Friday morning.
Okay. Oh, I can't hear you.
Oh,
Oh, no, you're back. You're back. You're there. Oh, now you're gone again.
how the hell does that happen?
Now you're back again. And you're gone again.
Okay. Am I on?
Yep, we
You
can hear
may, you
you.
may want to unplug your wired connection and plug it back in.
Yeah. How's that?
You're
That's
good.
Okay. All right. I tell candidates never go beyond a day or 2 at the most, because companies will get scared. They'll offer you the job and they'll say, hey, we really want to hire Steve, but we're not going to hear from him till Friday. We got Leroy in the wings. There's not that much difference between these 2 guys. We can't afford to run the risk of losing Leroy. And then Steve tells us something different, decides not to take the job. We'll hire Leroy and forget Steve. So usually people in a company can tolerate waiting a day or so. Much beyond that, they start getting afraid, because what they think is this guy's taken our offer and he is comparing it to somebody else, or is using it as leverage somewhere else, which you are. That's fine. Now, with the people tomorrow, I would say in the beginning of the interview, now look, I want to be straight up with you guys. I have another offer. I need to let these people know something by tomorrow. Let's talk turkey.
Okay. And you say Friday would be okay to say?
Friday, a day, companies will usually wait a day. When it starts to get to be 3 days or 4 days, the people in the companies will start thinking, man, if we were this guy's number 1 choice, then he'd tell us, he'd let us know in a day or so. A day you could get away with. Much beyond 2 days. In fact, I tell my clients, my candidate or anybody else's candidate can't give you an answer in 24 hours. Let's move on to the next one.
Okay.
Steve,
All right.
thank you for that question. Ron, do you have a question?
I actually do. So Steve, I retired last year, so I'm not in the market, but I got a question for you. In my period that I was unemployed for a while, I got to where literally I was losing out to an internal candidate almost every time. I mean, a bunch, like 11 times.
Yes.
So I want just what your opinion on this, because I did it anyway, but I would begin to ask the question, do you have an internal candidate? And if so, do you have a formal method to rank and rate against an external candidate? What do you think of that?
That's a great question. Because lots of times companies, my candidates are bridesmaids. Now, we try to ferret that out, okay? But lots of times they're being compared to other. So we simply ask them before we even start working the opportunity, do you have any internal candidates? But I think if you're an individual like what you're doing, I think that's a perfectly great question to ask while you're in the interviewing process, especially if you're getting down, because you don't want to waste your time on something that an internal candidate is always going to have an advantage. It's
Right.
not fair, but as my 5-year-old granddaughter said the other day, life isn't fair. I don't know where she learned it, but it's not fair, but that's the way it is. But that's a good question to ask. That shows a lot of business acumen on your part, in my opinion.
Great, Ron, thank you very much. All right, anybody else? We got time for 1 or 2 more questions. Anybody else? Question? Well, my question for you is, you're in the recruiting business. You're seeing, you have companies calling you. What's in your crystal ball? What do you see for 2023?
It's really interesting. I've seen 8 recessions since 1973. This is the only one where I have ever seen that it is not an employment recession. For crazy reasons. It was real interesting, whether you agree with him or not. Biden last night was taking credit for all of the jobs. And I remember when Clinton did the same thing, the economy was on its rear end, but these guys claimed that they are the ones that were building the economy with the jobs market. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with the population growth or lack of it. The average boomer is 66, 67 years old on their way out of retirement. If they got laid off or lost their job in the pandemic, once you get to that 56, 57 range, it's harder to find a job. There are fewer people behind us in the market. It just, the bottom line is there are fewer people in the marketplace than there have ever been. And the attitude towards work is different since the pandemic. People don't put as much effort in work. So the bottom line is that there's 1.7 jobs for every person that's looking for one. So last year was the best year that's been in the employment economy in 15 years. And this year isn't quite kicked off to be that great because of the economy, but I think it's going to be as good. So there are more jobs out there than there are people. And it's probably going to be that way primarily because of the pig in the python of the baby boomers retiring, and the Gen Zers have a different attitude towards work. So just a lot of things are convoluting the market, but it means that there are jobs out there, and there are more of them.
Great. Well, Tony, thank you very much for your time. I know we're at the top
Pleasure.
of the hour, so thank you. Great presentation. And, it's always great to, check up with you and see what's going on out here in the community.
Jeff, really appreciate you having me, and it's always a pleasure. You're kind to do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Tony. All right. Before we get done here, we do want to, let's see here. Let me get a little spotlight here. We want to conduct a little interview, a little questionnaire here. So we've popped this questionnaire up on the screen. We would love to know where you live. So I know a lot of you are outside the DFW area, but some of you are inside. And the reason we're asking this question is because since the pit crew will be going back live on the 1st and 3rd Wednesdays of the month starting in March, we want to know, do we think maybe we'll get you to show up? So at this point, we're just trying to find out where you live. So we've got 11 people that have answered so far. If everybody else could get in, we're up to 13, 14. We got 20 people can respond here. So let's see what we get. 16, come on. 16, can we get to 17? All right, I think we're done here. All right, let me just share the results. As you can see, 41% of us live outside the DFW area, 41% live east of I-35, and 3 of the people live on the west side of the Metroplex. So we'd really, Ron, we'll let you take that into consideration, and we'll conduct this poll the next couple of weeks just so we have an idea of what we're doing here. So thank you very much for participating in that. All right, let me share a few slides. We'll get out of here today. Career DFW and Career USA, we're putting on training 4 days a week. Please, please, please join us. We've got some great stuff coming up. Tomorrow, Kurt Vondermatter, who's a retained search consultant, will be with us to talk about networking. The CEO, the coach, the friend. How do you get a network to the 3 different people that are there listed there? So it's a great presentation. Come join us tomorrow. Also, he'll be talking about the prayer letter, a great way, a great networking tool, how to let your contacts know that you're out looking for some help. So we'll talk about and we'll share that tomorrow at 1 o'clock. This Friday at the North Dallas Plano Career Focus Group, Elizabeth Lyons will be with us. Elizabeth is a recruiter. She's Very interesting profile if you want to check her out on LinkedIn. She's going to talk about the overall job seeking market and the job hunt. What is she's going to pull out her crystal ball and tell us what she thinks is going to happen for 2023. So come join us, and I know we'll have some Q&A time at the end. You can ask her some questions as a recruiter. I will say this: she's one of the recruiters when she was recruiting heavily. Like, one question she would always ask a candidate is, "Why do you want to work here?" And if you didn't have a good answer from why do you want to work for this company, you didn't advance. So I just think that, you know, Elizabeth's got a lot of experience and really interesting concepts that she'll be presenting to us this Friday. Next Tuesday, for our LinkedIn Tuesday presentation, how to create a LinkedIn brand. It tells your key contacts who you are, what you do, and how you can help. This is with Terry Sullivan from BuzzPro. The event will not be recorded, so if you want to watch it next Tuesday, you will need to watch it live. Next Wednesday, Jack Bick will be with us to talk about clarity when you need it most. That'll be the last of our special guest speaker series. So if you'd like to, you know, come join us next week for that. This session has been recorded. It will be on the Career DFW and Career USA YouTube channel. On the Career USA YouTube channel, one of the things you're going to find under the interview category, and I'll point it out in just a second, we've got the 13 seminars, 13 workshops. We're going to start these up again here at the end of February, and we'll plow through them over the next few months. The first 5 sessions are all what do you do before the interview, preparing for the interview, how to make sure your star stories are ready to go, video interviewing, how to analyze the job description. The next 5 sessions are what do you do during the interview, how to build rapport with the interviewer, how to demonstrate enthusiasm. So really some really great information. And then the last 3 are some advanced topics about information interviews, questions, answers, about cultivating confidence. So all that information is on the Career USA YouTube channel right now, but we, like I said, we will be replaying those over the next couple months, starting the end of February. Click on playlist. Otherwise, you'll see all the different videos that are on there. And then at the very bottom, pick whichever topic you want. In this case, pick interviewing, and down where you see that red arrow, view full playlist, up will come a list, and you just have to scroll down and find the event that you're looking for. Just look down for the session number, and you'll be able to go back and watch those sessions at your convenience. If you're not receiving emails about our workshops, please join the Career USA mailing list. If you happen to find out about us just on Facebook or whatever, you can join our mailing list. Send an email to Career USA, +subscribe at groups.io. What will happen is you'll never be spammed, but what you will get is the topic of the day, the title of the day, and most importantly, the Zoom link of the day. That way you can open up your email, click on the Zoom link, and you'll be right there in our in the workshop that we're doing that day. Please remember, Career DFW, we're a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We have no full or part-time employees. Everybody's a volunteer. All of our speakers are volunteer. I'm a volunteer. Everything I've done over the last 14 years has just been to help you land your next great opportunity. So thank you very much for joining us today, everybody. Have a great afternoon. I see Patty's in there talking about Crystal Knows. She'll be doing a presentation about Crystal Knows on February 17th, a week from Friday. So, you know, please come join us. You'll really, really enjoy it. For everybody else, have a great afternoon, and we hope to see you tomorrow or later in the week.
Jeff,